Hello everyone, I'm bringing you a video today which is again on the US-Vietnam War theme, and what we're having a look at in this video are a few undershirts. Now one of these is original sort of Vietnam War era, the other two are more modern but are useful stand-ins, and that's what we're going to have a look at. These are all of crew neck or round neck variety. There were other types used as well with a U-neck, or some private purchase examples were quite common as well from Fruit of the Loom and other manufacturers. So this isn't the be-all and end-all, but it's a good example of the sort of most typical and the basic issue examples of undershirt, which are quite useful to have, which were sometimes worn on their own with no tropical combat jacket on top, of course. So you do occasionally see these worn as the outer garment. Certainly later in the war that becomes more common, depending on unit, naturally. So they're quite a useful thing to have, and that's why I thought it was worth making a video looking at them in some detail. I say only one of these, one of the white examples, is actual Vietnam War era. The other two are more modern, but we're going to have a look at these in some detail now. So here we have the two undershirts we're going to look at. The one on the right is a 70s dated white example. You can clearly see it's white. On the left we have, I believe, possibly an 80s or 90s olive example. And I bought this basically as a stand-in to wear as a Vietnam War stand-in. Basically, I don't want to be wearing originals. Well, I potentially would for photographs and so forth. I would like to find an original Vietnam War era olive drab undershirt, but there are detail differences with this. It's better than just buying a civvy t-shirt in an olive drab colour. However, there are detail differences in the construction. Nominally it's the same garment, but as you'll see, there are some detail differences. On the right, say this example is dated 1973, and we'll have a look at the details of that in just a moment and cross compare. First thing we'll have a look at is the ink stamp inside. So these 60s and 70s dated examples are generally stamped with an ink stamp in the back of the collar, as you can see here, or just below the collar. Undershirt, man's cotton white, 1/4 sleeve crew neck. That's the official nomenclature for these at this time. And then the DSA gives a date there of 73, and this is a size medium, as you can see. And then this later example, and later examples than this, this olive example, have a tag in the collar instead, have care instructions on the back and the details on the front here. Small, and then the stock code under that, and you can see here this is undershirt, 1/4 sleeve, crew neck, olive drab. So details there, as you can see. This, as I say, I believe to be a later example, certainly post-Vietnam, but exactly when it's from I'm not sure. I'm saying 80s or 90s, but it could be later than that even. Looking at these, they are very, very similar other than the colour. As you can see, the collar and everything is similar in terms of construction and so forth. The various details you're looking for a 70s or 60s even example of one of these is there's no stitching at the front here for the collar, no stitching visible, that's all internal. As you can see there, the seam is stitched together internally, so you just have the sort of seam folded back on itself here, you can't see any stitching. If we turn this round and we look at the back, the stitching is visible, as you can see there, and that starts from, a bit of fluff on there, remove that. That starts from the shoulder seam here, as you can see, so it comes from just in front of the shoulder seam, about an inch forward and back, the stitching becomes visible on that side, whereas on this side, it's actually just from the shoulder seam itself. So at the front, there's no stitching visible in the collar, because you see this, of course, whether you're wearing this as an undershirt or as an outer garment. That's an important element of the design to try and get right to replicate the look of these issue undershirts. The other thing with this is the stitching around the cuff, and we can see detail of that there. That's a sort of somewhat important detail with these as well. And if we look at this example, first of all, very similar in terms of the collar there. You can see no stitching visible at the front. We then have stitching visible at the back, as you can see. So far so good, but slightly different. That then continues down the arm, which is just a slight difference in terms of construction of these. One thing to note though is that the sleeves are shorter, and now obviously these are slightly different sizes. One's a small, one's a medium. However, the sleeves are considerably different in length, as you can see. A good inch difference there, inch and a bit difference. And you'll also notice that the stitching around the cuff is different as well, the opening of the arm. If we compare those side by side, you can see the difference in the stitching there. And it's just that the way these were manufactured differs somewhat. And I have a later white example as well. Hopefully that camera will sort of pick that up and There we go, reduce the brightness down a little bit. I have a later white example as well, which also has the stitching as we see on the olive example here. So that does seem to be something that changed over time. So fairly minor differences, but they are detailed differences, and they may matter, you know, to you. They do to me, really. I'd prefer to pick up a 70s or even, well, a 70s example, an olive example would be nice to have for limited wear for sort of my purposes. I don't tend to wear a Vietnam kit very much. I don't do a huge amount of Vietnam reenacting or anything. It's mainly for my sort of my own interest and obviously for making videos for the channel as well. So that's just a comparison of this white example, 70s dated, and what I believe to be 80s or 90s olive example, which I had initially purchased for use as a stand-in. Now, I may well still use it for that, but it does have these detail differences compared to original undershirts from the Vietnam War era. Another thing to note as well, of course, is that these were made in different variants as well. You did have an example with an oval opening at the neck rather than a round opening, the crew neck, and that was sort of a soft V neck almost, the way it came down. That obviously generally isn't visible if worn underneath the tropical combat uniform, so I'm less interested in picking one of those up, but they are, nevertheless, they're out there, they're interesting. They were another issue type of undershirt that was used at the time. And undershirts were also privately purchased as well, so there would be some variations there, which, you know, as I say, you could potentially say, well, these later ones might fit into that. Generally speaking, the undershirts which were purchased, or t-shirts which were purchased, were from Fruit of the Loom, manufacturers like that, and available through the PX, but they are somewhat different to modern manufactured t-shirts from manufacturers such as that. So again, it's not an easy fix really. But as I say, very happy to have this original 70s dated white example, and I've seen 60s dated examples of these that have exactly the same construction details as we've seen here. So having this means it can be worn for earlier periods, even though it's 70s dated, which is useful. As I say, a hunt is now on to find a suitable olive example from that sort of 60s, 70s era, or particularly 70s era. Is probably easier to find a 70s dated one with the ink stamp in the collar rather than a paper or cloth tag. I say paper tag, it's not a paper tag, a cloth tag in the collar. So just a quick detail comparison of these two. I'd initially planned to look at the other white example as well, but there's no real point. It's just the details of this one replicated. I think the collar band is slightly larger on the late white one as well. Another small detail difference. But hopefully it's been useful comparing these and having a look at sort of the differences between the earlier and later undershirts and what you're looking for specifically in terms of details when you're trying to find an undershirt for use with Vietnam uniform and kit, US Vietnam uniform and kit. One thing I would say is I don't believe there is anyone who makes a good reproduction of these, unfortunately. So it is originals or potentially using later examples as a stand-in. I believe that's the only way of getting something that looks at least halfway right. So there it is, a quick look at these two undershirts and a quick talk about the undershirts which were used in Vietnam. So I do hope you found it interesting looking at this, and hopefully it's been useful from a sort of reenacting point of view. Certainly in terms of wearing, the more modern ones are probably the best bet. I wouldn't want to wear an original sort of 60s or 70s dated example to death. Maybe later 70s perhaps, but as I say, there's no real need to, because more modern examples do exist, are readily available and are decent stand-ins. So that's my advice, I guess, at the end of the video here. I do hope you found it interesting. As I say, if you have and you'd like to see more of this sort of thing, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the bell, the notification button down below. That will of course alert you when I upload future videos. That's everything for this video, so until next time, bye for now.